is the man himself, Peter Lierni. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Good morning, Gene.
It is morning. We are recording in the end of June 2023. This will be revealed and released a few weeks from now. But Peter, I talked a little about what you do in the intro, but tell us in your own words, what is it that you're doing right now?
Well, right now I am marketing a software that we released. It's called SET for short, which stands for the Solution Engineering Tool, which helps companies do the upfront thinking in advance of the riding to win a competitive pursuit. In particular, high dollar value, mission critical, solution-based prime contracts. And the software is based upon a book that I published a few years ago. And that book, the basis for the book was a framework that I developed a number of years ago that was successfully proven at the federal, state, local, and overseas markets on how to do that upfront thinking to win a competitive pursuit.
So you developed the software yourself or with your own team?
I have a team, and the team is very special to me because two of the individuals are my best friends. One I've known for over 22 years. Another one I've known for about 16 years. Another gentleman who's been a longtime mentor of mine, who has published many books on technology, security, software, etc., taught me how to write an algorithm over 2 decades ago, and we use those algorithms in our software. So he's part of it. And then I have another gentleman that I've known for over about 17 years who just joined us, and he's going to be our chief AI scientist, implementing our AI roadmap.
Peter, how did you come to recognize that there was a need for a tool that you could develop with a team that you pulled together? Or was it your idea? Did you pull this team together? How did you get to this recognition of the problem such that you might be able to be a part of a solution?
Sure. Well, in life, we all have experiences, and we also all have encouragement. Many years ago, I was part of a very successfully acquired firm that I grew up in professionally and personally. And in that firm, we did everything that we called science to soldier. We focused on very hard problems as a company, and those founders invested in us. And I always tell people it's not processes or tools that make you win a competitive pursuit, it's culture, but they invested in us. So I had a way from my own mental models I was applying, started resulting in winning deals. And after our firm was successfully acquired, the founder pulled me aside and he said, whatever you're doing, you should put it down, because it was in my head. And when I brought to him a large board a number of months later, I said, well, this is what I'm doing. He said to me, well, you closed a gap in the market because the market doesn't show us how to think. And so I had another gentleman a number of months later, because I had built a course around it, who was actually the first federal CIO ever in the federal government. He reached out to me, and he works for a very large systems integrator. He says, you know, Peter, I run over 300 accounts in over 100 countries now, all IT accounts. And he said, how about you protect your IP and you come work with me and you apply that framework? And everywhere we applied that framework, it won over $860 million worth of deals, like in 2.5 years. So subsequently, that individual who first, my founder, who pulled me aside in the very beginning, he encouraged me. He says, Peter, why don't you turn what you've done into a book? And I did that. Went back to consulting on my own. I was teaching my course. And then in around the 2019 timeframe, he pulled me aside a third time. And he said, why don't you turn what you've done into a software? So one of my best friends and I, we had developed 2 other softwares over the years. And he's an expert software engineer and good systems engineer. And he and I just started, and I had we're both systems thinkers. I understand systems and software engineering very well, and we started building it. Actually leveraging some of the frameworks that we had used earlier, software frameworks years earlier. Then I subsequently brought in another friend, and then eventually a mentor of mine, who I call my governor, who sort of keeps me tempered. And then very recently, we just brought on our chief scientist, whose focus is on AI, who I've known for 17 years. So relationships matter in life. We all have different knowledge, skills, and abilities from our education, training, and experience. And, I always tell also in life, you show people grace, because people that you have good or bad times with in the past, those are your proponents and advocates and supporters in the future, and vice versa. And so that's pretty much how we are right now. So now we spend most of our time marketing the software. We've had some great feedback, some really great large systems integrators, and we're getting ready for a sandbox with one right now, over $2 billion company. We have companies licensing the software, but it's all been bootstrapped. It's all been bootstrapped and self-funded. We're moving towards our final patent. We're working with the patent attorneys now for over 2.5 years.
Let me, if I could connect that patent concept back
Sure.
toward the beginning, the CIO,
Yes,
who gave you counsel, said he wanted you to come help him, but he wanted you to protect your IP.
that's right.
At the time, what were you thinking about protecting intellectual property?
Oh, I knew that I knew I had something, because when an individual who builds a company and gets it sold for $236 a share, and he's really successful, and he's your mentor, you grow up under him personally and professionally, he tells you something, hey, you close a gap in the market because the market doesn't show us how to think. You have something. So when you had somebody of pedigree telling you that. So the other individual is a very ethical individual, and he knew what I had, and he knew that it fulfilled a gap that he was experiencing. So he wanted me to help him out. And he said, you can protect your IP. And I did that. So I brought in, I shared, because whenever I consult, I teach at the same time. And so for me, just working with this company and I was just teaching again, and I was working with them, left seat, right seat on deals. But yeah, I protected that IP, which was the IP, which formed the basis for the book.
So, Peter, help us better appreciate what this tool can help a company do. You're talking about thinking up front. Can you give us some examples of different ways that you would approach the federal sale, or any sale perhaps, and describe some of the types of thinking?
Fair enough. So in our ecosystem of winning, there are many players. There are individuals such as yourself, Gene, who have expertise on how to influence Capitol Hill. There are other individuals that have expertise on how to really talk to engage heads of agencies. There are business developers, right? There's a role called capture manager, and I'll go back to that in a moment. There are solution architects who help develop solutions. There are proposal managers. There are other subject matter experts and pricers. These are all the people that are part of an ecosystem of winning a competitive pursuit. And I also forgot contracts people and lawyers too. But my wheelhouse was understanding capture and bringing a different way of looking at it. So we're all products of our backgrounds. So for example, when I was enlisted and then a junior officer in the Navy, I started getting appreciation that everything's connected to something else, that that life is like a system of systems, and that there's no shortcuts, that if you want assurance of something occurring, you have to do the work. And that was always ingrained in me at that stage. Then many years ago, when I was hired by a company in the 2000 timeframe, and I had consulted to them in the late 90s as well, but I joined them in 2000. The founder of that company was successful in everything he touched. And he would always ingrain into us, we are in a thinking person's business. Thinking person's business. And when you take the equity out of your house and you build a successful company, you don't suffer fools. So I would often see in my career individuals who were entrusted to win a competitive pursuit where a lot of money was spent on these people over a long period of time. And every 2 weeks, they'd go before a gate review, talking about the state of the deal. And they were really great presenters. And they probably swung a golf club really well. But when you look behind that slide, that PowerPoint slide, there was nothing there. They didn't do the upfront work. So therefore, what they were doing was they were setting people downstream up for failure. At the same time, I spent about 12 years in the Pentagon, and I was part of a small team that assessed every large ACAT 1D program you can think of. And all of our findings were going up before the Defense Acquisition Board, and also for findings for a number of CURDI congressional reviews, for major milestone decisions and more. And I got a really good appreciation of looking at programs being formulated in the acquisition phases really early, and they're going all the way through to milestone C. And what I started doing was I built a mental model that, hey, there's really no difference between building a large weapon system and doing capture. And what I mean by that is that certain risk in a weapon system design is acceptable, at milestone A, but it's not acceptable when you put it into production. So, for example, you might have a security risk that's acceptable in the very beginning, but it's not acceptable once you field the system. Well, the same thing's true for capture. Okay. And in building a weapon system, there's this thing called the cone of uncertainty, and we want to squeeze down that uncertainty as quickly as possible. On the flip side, on the positive side, we have opportunity, which if we realize it becomes benefit. And the negative side, we have risk, which if we realize it becomes an issue. And I started thinking about that when I did capture. And whenever I was consulting, and I had a team of people with me as well, we were always doing analysis. So when I was doing capture, I was just inherently doing analysis also. And I was also keeping in mind, you got to do your homework. So what happens very often, and there's a lot of capture managers, they think that I have to meet the customer, I got to build a team, etc. All essential things, but there's a lot more. If they show you that win strategy on that slide, and you say to them, can you show me in a traceable, irrefutable, defensible, and expendable manner how you got there? Most cannot. I was able to, though, because I did the work, and I started showing people how to do that.
Hearing a reliance on one's charisma as something that you were able to counter with facts and analysis.
Yes, because charisma is risky. There are a lot of people that are charismatic, but what happens is very often those people are not around when the bill comes due. So my thing was, whenever I did capture, you have to look at not just a customer that's going to be the buying customer, but you have to look at the company's internal customers and set them up for success. And that's what a really good capture professional does. And that's what I was doing.
Peter, if a company is using the solution engineering tool, what are the sort of results that they might expect to see, and what sort of change would typically be required for a company to implement that tool?
Okay, I'll start the second question first. SET does not take away from a company's existing investments in process or tools. It's complementary because it's a new kind of tool in the toolbox. It's so it doesn't take away from an investment. We built it originally as a software as a service. However, we started having some very large integrators asking if we could put it on premise behind a firewall. And that's what we're working on right now. So what does SET do for a company? I know that whether a company wins or loses and they use SET, the value of the company will always be going up. See, what SET does is it puts confidence in a C-suite's understanding on a state of the pursuit. Because between gate reviews, particularly as I like to say on those high dollar value, mission critical, solution-based prime contracts, it's a black box. There's a lot of uncertainty. But SET gives the C-suite visibility into, hey, if this is your win strategy, I can see how you actually got there. In it, as I say, a traceable, irrefutable, defensible, and explainable manner. Every time SET is being used, it's building a data lake of proprietary competitive intelligence specific to your company's crown jewels. And that's important because if a company buys business intelligence from a third party, they don't have a competitive advantage. They just have parity. The competitive advantage comes into play is when you take that information and you do the analysis and you get understanding, and then you use it to formulate your strategies and more. That's your crown jewels. And very often, at least from my experience, from when I see companies acquired in the national capital region, the companies that acquired a company don't get the return on investment because they do not know how the company got to the win. The people who got the company to win often leave, and even if it's written in a proposal, you can't see the strategies. But what SET does, it reveals the original Greek, the crown jewels of how you got to competitive win. The second thing is every time it's used, it's capturing the intellectual capital of its users all the time. So those are two big pluses of SET and more. It also helps you quantify, using the algorithms that we use, it can help you quantify the goodness of your capture effort, your readiness for recompete, if an opportunity should be in your pipeline, if an opportunity should go for a bid decision, and it could also quantify the growth status of your company if you're using SET at the enterprise level.
Peter, you strike me as quietly breaking through right now. Is there a point where you see achieving critical mass such that this is recognized as the tool that nearly everybody should have?
Well, you know, I had a company last fall. I'll just say it's a large aerospace defense and security company. I'll leave it at that. And the individual came up to me and they said, I looked at these 30 softwares and yours is the only innovative one. Then that individual slammed their chest and they said, I'm the one who bought another particular product into that company. And they said, can we test your tool out? So they tested our tool for 6 weeks, 16 people, and they came back to us. And they said two things. They said, your tool aligns perfectly with our business development process, which that felt really good when they said that. And then they said, two, it's transformational for us. And then they said, can you put it behind their firewall? And they wanted me to work with their capture person, facilitate a deal with them. And so working with this company is sort of like working with the government. It's a slow process. We're in the procurement system, but it's a long cycle. And I do know that from other companies that have sold software in there. So we're going through that journey. At the same time, likewise, we have another $2 billion plus large company that sees the same thing as software and we're getting ready for a sandbox with them. So we do license it to smaller companies, and that's where we are right now. So it's, you know, it's a culmination of decades of experience from myself and other people bringing our talents together, people that share common values. We bootstrapped it, cash and kind, all sweat equity. And we know we have something that's new to the market. If we had capital, we could move a lot faster, but we haven't sought capital. And that's just where we are right now.
Peter, I can I can sense that success on a very large scale is imminent. If we were to come together 5 years from now, what do you think we'd be talking about?
Well, I'd like to say that on a personal side, maybe there's a large CRM vendor, one of the larger ones known in the market, that decided to acquire our software and cross-sell it into their existing customer base, because the software would allow them to go deeper into the business development lifecycle of GovCons in particular. And even though our software is definitely useful for business to business, and squeeze more revenue out of customers they already have. That's the first part. The second part is that I've always felt that the GovCon industry is shortchanging government. And what I mean by that is the government goes to industry because it has gaps, capability gaps that it can't, and it has a set of requirements, and it needs industry to help them address those requirements, because the government needs to realize quantifiable benefits and it doesn't want risk. And industry has turned winning more into being a game versus doing the thinking, the hard thinking. And I'm talking of vendors of all sizes to help government. I don't think that industry is doing its fair share of thinking to help the government get the benefit realization, risk mitigation that it needs. And I will believe that, I hope that our software is adopted by industry, and that the government could get greater value out of industry. Because we're treating it right now as a process. It's not a process.
Peter, I'm excited for you because I can just tell that this is about to break through. Is there a final question here? Is there a size of company that might be too small to use a tool like this? You're talking about selling into very large primes right now, as well as others, but as on the lower end, are there companies that are too small?
Well, that's a great question. So, like, for example, right now I'm getting ready to sell a license to a $35 million company that is in the security space that supports, like, say, customers like Space Force. So they're not there. I have an $80 million company licensing it. So it's a matter of, once you understand what the software is and how to use it, size shouldn't make a difference. But what we have learned is that very small companies very often, unless the ones that are more mature, like the one I'm dealing with, is they're just trying to figure out, as they get into this morass of the federal contracting, how to keep the lights on, right? Trying to understand all the rules and everything else. The big guys, there's so many variables and they move so slowly, and they all have their own life cycle in some ways. And so it becomes a timing thing. And so have been focusing on the middle market players. So what do you define as the middle market? So I said, okay, maybe it's between 150 and $1 billion, right? But what I aspire most with those middle market players is they have a hands-on owner and they feel that they're stuck. Because when you're in the middle market and you don't have the scale, you're not getting, say, any kind of socioeconomic advantages. But those are the best companies. The ones in the middle market that are struggling, those are the ones that eventually become the most successful. And those are the ones we are trying to focus on, although company of any size would benefit from SEP.
Peter Lierni, thanks so much for joining us on Make Your Move.
Gene, thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you the best. Bye-bye.